Welcome to the Joy Spot, a talk show where I get to speak to celebrities, to spiritual leaders, to authors, and really be able to explore joy and celebrating it and cultivating it and really their life journey as well. If you are watching live with us today, say hello. Let me know where you are watching from in the world and also what platform you're on. If you're streaming in from my Facebook group, The Joy Spot, be sure that you give permissions. It's all this silly tech stuff. So that we know actually who is commenting with us live today. I already see that we've got some people, and by people, I mean you. So before we dive in today, I just want to share a little bit about our guest, which I'll bring on in just a moment. But if you've never met me before and you're like, who is this girl that I'm hanging out with? My name is Sherry Elise, also known as America's Joy Magnet, no pressure. I am a two-time TEDx speaker, a best-selling author, and then, of course, your host. And today we are going to be talking about the importance of leaving our stories behind, about the true meaning of life, about loss, about joy, and love, and about what really matters in the end. I'm going to read a little bit about our guest today. Steve Leder is the senior rabbi of Wilshire Boulevard Temple in Los Angeles and the author of such critically acclaimed books as The Beauty of What Remains, How Our Greatest Fear Becomes Our Greatest Gift, which was published by Penguin Random House in 2021 and quickly became a national bestseller. His other books include More Beautiful Than Before, How Suffering Transforms Us, The Extraordinary Nature of Ordinary Things, and More Money Than God, Living a rich life without losing your soul. He's a graduate of Northwestern University. He studied at Trinity College, Oxford, and was ordained at Hebrew Union College. He's the winner of numerous awards for his interdenominational and cross-cultural dialogue. Leder's been a guest everywhere: NBC, CBS, ABC, NPR, PBS, Spectrum, and Fox, and has been featured in the New York Times and LA Times, among many other places. Rabbi Leder's newest book, which we're going to talk about today, For You When I'm Gone, 12 Essential Questions to Tell a Life Story, was published also by Penguin Random House in June of last year and is a New York Times bestseller. Newsweek Magazine twice named him one of the 10 most influential rabbis in America. But most important to Steve is being Betsy's husband and Aaron and Hannah's dad. He's also a Jew who likes to fish. Go figure. Please welcome to the show my guest, and I would like to say my friend now, Rabbi Steve Leder. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Sherry. So great to be with you. Thank you for that very kind and generous introduction.
Yes, I'm so excited. We've had some time to talk off screen, and then I got a chance to be interviewed by you on your show. And I understand why everybody is enthralled by you. And for so many reasons, because your energy is beautiful, because your wisdom is deep, because your soul is kind, and because you're generous with your time and with your heart. So thank you for joining me today on the Joy Spot.
Oh, I think we should quit now.
You're like, I'm good. Let's walk away.
Everything's going to be a disappointment after that. I mean, come on.
Well, guys, you heard it here first. So I'm glad you tuned in for this part. Oh, look, we got my mother Lark here today. Good morning, Mom.
Oh, my goodness. That's
I
great.
know. We've also got Facebook user streaming in from Long Island, New York. I can't see your name, but welcome to the show. So, Steve, I'm going to start with something that you wrote in your book, and then we're going to go back just a little bit.
Sure.
You wrote, I saw that people can and do face death and grief, even when they think that they can't. I never would have believed it at the time, but I've become much like my first boss and that funeral director whose tour shocked me with its matter-of-factness long ago. From years of experience, they understood that death really is a part of life, essential, universal, expected, mundane even. None of us are making history when we die. And in many ways, all our deaths are the same. I understand that now too.
Mm.
I read that and I went, whew, okay. It's all mundane, but our lives are rich.
Yes.
We're going to talk a lot about this today. But before we dive into the death and grief and loss and pain and all the aspects, you're a rabbi. Did you grow up imagining that this is what you wanted to do? I'd love for you to share with us a little bit
Yeah.
about this journey to becoming a rabbi.
The answer is, like most answers to most questions you ask any rabbi, the answer is yes and no. So the yes part is I decided to become a rabbi when I was 15 years old. So in that sense, yes, this is something I imagined even before that, but I made the real decision. I remember exactly when and where. It was when I was 15, but I was also the kid who at 13 years old loved being up there for my bar mitzvah, loved it, owned the room, right? I was just felt like I was born for that.
Yeah.
And it was a place, the synagogue was a place that I felt was special and beautiful and elevated and filled with wisdom and knowledge and the kinds of conversations that frankly were not happening in my um, working class family. My parents were 17 and 18 years old when they got married. They had 5 kids before they were 30. Neither went to college. And there were many beautiful things in my family, but elevated discourse was certainly not one of them. Um, and so I always felt it was a special place and a special calling. And at 15 said, "Oh, this is for me." So in that part, yes, I imagine it. Now, did I have any idea what it would be like to embrace the role in the way
Mm,
in which I have embraced it? No. I had no idea that any of what I have become engaged in was possible. I had no idea of how difficult it would be. I had no idea how difficult it would be on my family. I'm
mm.
still, frankly, just beginning to really learn as my kids are now in their 30s and speaking more openly about their childhoods and their young adulthoods. So, yes, I imagine being a rabbi. No, I had no idea what that really would mean for my
Yeah.
life.
It's interesting what I read about, you being sent to summer camp because you were, that kid that I guess got arrested. Well, I
I
don't
got,
know. Were you arrested for
I was
stealing Bob
arrested.
Dylan albums?
Yes, I was arrested when I was 14. So I already said there were 5 kids. I was the fourth of 5.
Wow.
My parents were pretty much done parenting by the time I rolled around. And I was I wasn't, ignored, but they didn't pay a whole lot of attention to me.
He'll figure it out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, just one simple example. Like we had a very wide creek that ran through our backyard. I would say is probably maybe 50, 75 yards wide, flowing water right through our
Mhm.
backyard. There were no fences. There was no, I mean, I was 4 or 5 years old out there playing around in the creek. So, we were kind of left to our own devices. And I was 14 years old. I was in ninth grade, junior high school. I was smoking pot every day at school. I was playing drums in a rock and roll band. My grades were good, which was the only sort of litmus test my parents had for whether we were behaving or not. And I got arrested because my bandmates and I decided it'd be a good idea to go to Target. We rode our bikes to Target and we tried to steal a bunch of albums. And I wanted a bunch of Bob Dylan albums. At least I had good taste, Sherry. So
Right. I mean, it
so I
wasn't
get
bad.
arrested. Yeah, I get arrested. I mean, it's very sophisticated when I think about it. I get arrested for shoplifting. My parents are on vacation in Miami. My big sister Marilyn has to come and get me out of the Huskow, St. Louis Park, Minnesota jail. I wasn't in jail, just in the office of the police department, but she had to come get me. My parents had to fly home. It was a big deal. And I felt awful. I was throwing up in the car on the way home
Oh.
from the police station.
You're a rebel there.
Yeah, and, yeah. So it got my parents' attention, which was the best
Yeah.
thing, and they realized that I needed to change my peer group, which means they needed to change my peer group and pay more attention to me. So they sent me to this Jewish summer camp in a place called Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. And Sherry, from the moment I stepped off the bus, I fell in love with everything about it.
Mm,
Everything.
yeah.
The I'd never seen a rabbi before in shorts and a t-shirt who could throw a baseball. That was amazing to me because my rabbis were these old, stuffy German guys.
Yeah.
Here were these like young guys who basically went into rabbinical school to avoid the Vietnam War, and they were like cool. I couldn't believe it. And there were, the counselors liked the music I liked, and the whole place just blew my mind. Um, and really, I never looked back from that moment on. I just felt like this is where I belong. This is for me. And and I I've n- I won't say I've never regretted the decision, but I have never been anything less than proud of the decision.
Mm. There's a lot to read into that in there.
Well, it's a
But
hard life. It's a hard
yeah,
job. If you
uh,
want to do it well, if you want to do it differently than others do it, if you want to really grow, it's like any other field. It requires your heart and your soul.
I imagine because I went to temple as a young girl, not regularly. We just went for the high holy holidays, and I saw that I had the same thing that you envisioned, or you saw the rabbis as, and you thought stuffy and all of this stuff. And in reading both from both of your books, I'm just going to post them here for those, The
Mm,
Beauty of What Remains and For When I'm Gone. Uh, what I never took into consideration until you talked about it. I just only saw the rabbis as giving the sermons, as
right.
doing the bar mitzvahs, and not what you did that, but then also what you had to face on a consistent basis. And you
Yes.
wrote in your book that you've had to preside over thousands of funerals, write thousands of eulogies.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that at that young age that was the thing that you were thinking about that you would be doing.
I had no idea what it would be like to shepherd people through terrible losses, death, the loss of a marriage, the loss of a career, the loss of a reputation, the loss of their money, the loss of a child. I don't think there's anything that sucks the marrow out of my bones more than helping parents bury a child. And I am the least affected, and it sucks the marrows out of my bones. So, this is and then there's the fundraising, which is also just so extraordinarily difficult from an emotional perspective. Because then something that should be non-transactional takes on an element of becoming transactional.
Mm,
And then you have the whole issue of managing people. I mean, we have a 10,000 member congregation. We have hundreds and hundreds of employees. They have problems. They have lives. They have families. They need to be hired, and sometimes they need to be fired. So you're also the CEO of a medium-sized business. And it's a lot. Now, that also feeds me because I get bored pretty easily. And I really like the multiplicity of opportunities. But being a rabbi of a very large synagogue like mine and growing it the way we have is requires things that I never ever could have imagined. And however, you make an interesting point about preaching. I used to teach a class at the seminary called homiletics, which is just a fancy word like homily for how to write sermons, wedding addresses, and eulogies. And the first thing, I would walk in and the students are like, I don't want to be in this class. This is bullshit. Why do I have to be here? I'm going to spend maybe 2% of my time preaching and, who cares? And the first thing I do is I did was I would sit them down and say, look, I know what you're thinking because it's what I was thinking when I was in this class 30 years ago. You're thinking, I'm going to give maybe 3, 4 sermons a month. Each will be 5 to 10 minutes long. Why do I need to focus on that when there's so many other things that I'm interested in? And my answer is, and you are proof of this, while preaching might be 2% of how you spend your time, it is going to be 100% of how most people evaluate you, because it's 100% of their experience with you. You are not going to be performing weddings, funerals, for most of your temple members. They're seeing you in that role almost 100% of the time. So while it's 2% of your time, it's 100% of their evaluative experience. So you better be great. That's how we started the class. But there's an awful lot more to being a rabbi than sermons.
Yeah. And what I have felt and seen, and just even what you're sharing right now is, and as you talked about, leading people, shepherding people through this, I mean, that plays a big toll on your own personal wellness, well-being.
Enormous.
How do you handle that?
Well, at times, not very well. The more difficult part for me, frankly, is, what you're describing is, and I don't mean to diminish it, but it's just hard work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Being the rabbi of, a 3,000 family congregation, the order of magnitude, the amount of work. Yeah, but that's just hard work. I grew up scrubbing toilets at Leder Brothers Scrap Iron and Metal in Minneapolis. Like, I know about hard work. That's not an issue. And that doesn't kind of erode your inner being. It's exhausting, but it doesn't erode your mental health or your inner being. The more difficult part is living as a symbolic exemplar. Living as not just a person, but living as a symbol in a person's psyche, living as a symbol for an entire community. And therefore never being able to be fully authentic. All of my relationships are colored by the fact that I'm a rabbi. Everyone interacts with me with their own set of projections and assumptions. And I really try to be gracious about it. And I believe I have been mostly gracious about it. But it's not an easy way to live. I remember, I like to say I'm widely known in a small circle. I can't imagine how celebrities do it. That's
can't. Exactly what I just thought about with celebrities, the life you're leading.
I'm not a celebrity like celebrity, but in a small community, I am extremely well known. And it's not that small a community. and it's an influential community.
Right.
So for me, imagine, I was 26 when they hired me. Imagine that experience as a 27, 28, 29-year-old kid. It twists you. And so that to me was the more difficult part. And then, as I said, the fundraising just is soul sucking. It's an extraordinarily important, but extraordinarily difficult thing to do. And I've become very, very good at it. But being very, very good at it comes with its own internal price, as does being very good at anything.
Yeah.
So, we can get into what it's like to be, the rabbi for a large and influential community. But we can also just leave it at the fact that it brings with it a whole host of other people's projections that you have to learn to live graciously with.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thank you for serving so many, because I know that that's not easy to do, as you said, for so many reasons. And being seen, as you said, as not fully who you are, but as the symbol. So I know that's not an easy life to live, but I know that beautiful lessons have come from of being that symbol.
Yes. Yes.
And when we fast forward to your current work now, I know you had said to me previously that your passions when you were young, before you discovered being a rabbi, like you always loved writing.
Yes. I
And
knew at a very young age that I could turn a phrase.
mhm,
I just had this ability with language, obviously unschooled and unstudied, and I was able to get better at it, but I could always turn a phrase, always.
yeah.
And that was always my like my superpower. And the other was having an incredibly, and I thank and despise my father for this. You know, there's dissonance in every parent-child relationship.
Mhm.
I
Hi, Mom.
she loves you and she hates you. But she's over it.
Yes.
I um my SAT scores were not as high as some of my classmates.
Mhm.
Um, but I have the ability to outwork most people.
Mhm.
And that's been the differentiator. That and the ability to tell a story. Ultimately, rabbis are storytellers. I
Yes.
think ultimately, I think ultimately all human beings are storytellers. You know, in one of my books, I quote the poet Muriel Rukeyser, who said, "The world is not made up of atoms; it's made up of stories."
Mm,
And I really believe that.
yeah.
We are ultimately the inheritors of stories. We're the holders of stories, and we're the teller of stories. And our life is a story ultimately. So in that sense, if you're willing to work really hard and you can tell a story, you're going to have the opportunity to move people.
Well, you tell beautiful stories. I got to tell you, I was moved just by this. I was there in your camp, summer camp with you, with the long-haired hippies and the
Yeah,
music. Like you
yeah.
do string your words beautifully together. I just want to encourage everyone that if you haven't grabbed Steve's books, I really want you to grab them. We're going to talk about them right now because I'm like looking
No,
at the time and I'm like,
yeah,
oh no.
yeah.
So talk to us about this journey towards let's start with the beauty of what remains,
Okay,
and really what brought about
yeah.
that book.
Well, okay. So basically, the beauty of what remains, honestly, was written in the form internally in the form of an apology.
Mm,
What do I mean by that? For 35 years, well, 32 years, I had been helping literally, you know, thousands of people through the death of a loved one. I'd seen 1,000 dead bodies. I'd written 1,000 eulogies, and that's not rabbinic hyperbole. That's real. And I thought I was doing a really good job of helping people through death and grief and loss, including the dying. Like I thought I'm pretty good at this. I'm helping people. And then my father died after a 10-year journey through Alzheimer's disease.
mm,
And in that experience, I realized how wrong I was about certain things that I had been saying and doing to help people. You know, there's an old Yiddish expression which is a half truth is a whole lie. And I realized in that journey from Steve Leder to the rabbi to Steve Leder the son that I was telling some half truths about death and grief and loss. And it
mm,
caused me to rethink of some very important aspects of loss and death and grief, and to fully appreciate and explore and experience the dualities of loss, the duality of memory, that it's beautiful and it's painful, right? The idea that you and I were raised with under the teaching of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that there are stages to death and dying and grief.
mhm,
I learned that that's bullshit. That grief is a non-linear
yeah,
experience. It's much more like waves than a descending line of pain. It's not how it
mm,
works, right?
yeah,
Um, so this book was my reassessment. It's both a memoir and a field guide. And that was the tricky part of writing it. I think we pulled it off. But that's what makes it different. There are very few field guides, memoirs about death and dying. By the way, very few written by men. Very few. It's a space,
Interesting.
it's a space dominated by female voices, which is of course fine, but it's nice to have that other perspective. And so the book is really about everything Steve Leder, the son, discovered that Steve Leder, the rabbi, didn't really fully understand in terms of death and grief and loss. So that's how that book came about. I learned so much through the experience, and I felt it would be helpful to other people.
What would you say is the biggest thing that you learned if you could wrap that one from your father's death, let's say, before we moved on to what for you when I'm gone?
That there are all these dualities that death brings up. That life is everything and life is nothing. That memory is beautiful and memory is painful. In the book, I say it's like being caressed and spat on at the same time. That we love our parents and we resent our parents. That death is beautiful and death is terrible. That we are alive and we are going to die. All of these dualities. Now, the biggest thing for me, after identifying these dualities, which by definition can't be reconciled. I mean, dualities are dualities, okay? They are irreconcilable differences. For me, making peace with what cannot be reconciled was a reconciliation. And that, to me, Sherry, if I hope that I got there with the reader. I think I did. Making peace with what cannot be reconciled is the most important reconciliation we can possibly achieve in life.
Yeah,
And my father's death in that sense, right? And my father's death in that sense ennobled my life. It was his last great lesson to me.
That's so powerful. I think when we're talking, like you said, not just about grief and loss, but the acceptance of all that you can't control and all that is, that, as you say that, I just feel freedom and I feel lightness and I feel
Accepting that
joy in that.
Well, there is joy in making peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict.
That's right.
That's not peace. That's détente. That's that's a true, that's a ceasefire, an internal ceasefire. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is a soul that has room for the dualities, where they can coexist without you being at war within yourself. And it's a warm peace, not a cold peace. So for me, this is what it means to be a spiritual person. Spirituality is the ability to live with these dualities in a peaceful, embracing way. And that's beautiful.
That is so beautiful. And I just brought up joy because, of course, that's everything
That's
related.
what you do, Sherry.
That would be weird if I didn't bring up joy at all. But I bring that up because it feels like the connection and the acceptance of these dualities of life, of death, of grief, of loss, all of that really stems to, not stems, but to the full expression of being alive and allowing ourselves to feel that.
Yeah, how can you experience joy or even happiness, really, if you are at war with these dualities internally? How can you live a peaceful, joyful life? So, for me, this is the significant lesson of death. I can do so much and I can do nothing. And that's the truth. Life means so much and ultimately it doesn't. And both are important, that I am unique and I'm just like everyone else.
Yup.
Right? All of these things,
Yeah.
once we embrace and make peace with them,
I feel that on a daily basis.
they bring us more joy, more peace, more wholeness, not less.
And so when you've come to learn this and see this about life, then we have to talk about, well, if all of this is just fading and fleeing and doesn't mean anything, how do we actually
Well,
bring meaning?
it actually does mean something because it's fading and fleeting. Imagine for a moment if we were deathless creatures. What what meaning would life have if we were deathless? No one would get married, have children, have a job. No, there'd be no ambition. We
Yeah.
wouldn't really be human if we were deathless creatures, right? Um, I'm going to badly paraphrase the poet Wallace Stevens, who basically said, the beauty of a flower is that it fades.
Hmm.
Right? Why don't we care about plastic flowers, artificial flowers? You know why? Because they have no death. They have no life.
Hmm.
They're of no interest. So it's not that life, Kafka said the meaning of life is that it ends. It's true. The fact that life ends is not what makes it meaningless. It's what makes it meaningful.
Yes. And to tie this in with your latest book,
Yes.
For You When I'm Gone, it we'll talk about that, but in first in relation to the meaning of giving it meaning
Right, right, right.
as well.
Well, okay, so we live in a culture where even the best among us, the best person watching this, the best person on the planet, it's certainly in Western civilization, we live in a world that teaches us again and again and again that what we have is who we are, that our
Mhm.
outer material existence is who we are, or worse, that outer material existence is an inner life, that what we have is meaning, creates meaning, right? And to me, this is like trying to eat a picture of food. It's and I like money and things as much as
You
the
said
next guy.
bland. All I got was bland. It's bland.
Yeah, I'm not disparaging money or things. Like I like nice things and I like making money, but I don't grant them existential meaning and purpose. And look, one of the saddest memories of my life was still hard. Was walk was walking down into the basement of my parents' townhouse after my dad died and seeing all of his stuff in a heap on the basement floor.
Hmm.
I mean, nobody wanted it. The Goodwill didn't want most of it. And if you think about it, what is our legacy? What do we leave? What is the final word most of our loved ones hear after we die from us? A legalese document written by a stranger, and it's entirely about who gets what and when and how much. It's all about our stuff, as if somehow the material will express the emotional. What I have one material thing from my father. You want to see it?
Yeah.
This is it. It's an old ruler.
Yeah, the ruler type thing, right? I
Yeah,
can't see it.
this was before tape measures.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And I keep it because on Saturday mornings, my dad owned some shitty buildings in Minneapolis. In addition to running the junkyard, he bought a few buildings. And on Saturday mornings, we would go and fix things in the buildings
Uh-huh.
because he would never hire anybody to do anything. And I was like the scrub nurse. Hand me this, hand me that. And I remember this is really about Saturday mornings with my dad.
Mm.
That first we got pancakes at the Town Talk Diner. Then we went to fix leaks and hinges and toilets and whatever. And then we went to Cafe de Napoli for lunch. That's what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
This is worth nothing materially, but it's worth everything spiritually. And so this book, For You When I Am Gone, is a way to help people create a document, which I call an ethical will or a legacy letter, that will actually leave people what they need, which is your love, your life wisdom, your what you learn from your regrets, what your final blessing to them would be, what you want on your epitaph, etc., etc. Now, Jews have been writing these since the 11th century, but most people know nothing about them. So this
Mm-hmm.
book will literally hold your hand as you create your ethical will for your loved ones. I've written it for our kids, and it's bound with our estate plan. Like, they don't get to the money till they
Really?
read this ethical will. Yeah. And
I
when
love
you
that.
really think about what you cherish from your loved ones who are gone, it's never a what. It's never a thing. And we make that mistake. There's a chapter in The Beauty of What Remains called Nobody Wants Your Crap. And double entendre is deliberate.
My good friend was just over in England clearing out her mother's space, and she just said she has so much crap.
Yeah.
Like, and she was like, I don't know what to do with this. She was like, I understand and it's sentimental to her, but what? So yeah, I get that. Can I shared with you this the first time that we talked, and with your book, it brought up, with the ethical will, it brought up the book that I gave to my grandmother in 1999 that asked her all questions about herself and the family.
Yeah.
And there was
You have
something
it.
in me, and I didn't know, there was something in me. I had seen it, and I was like, I want to know more about my family. And it has been the most precious thing until years ago. I forgot about it and so I think I urge people, this is what's really going to matter, is
That's
exactly,
right.
are these 12 questions. I'm going to show some of your chapter, your 12 essential questions,
Yep.
and ask you about these.
Sure.
I know that you said, sorry, everybody. I know that I heard you say that, right, that you basically wrote these in what you call 35 years and
And
15
15
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
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 Talk
Because
about that.
my editor asked me, when I handed in the first draft, she said, how did you come up with these questions in this order? They just unfold a person's truth. A eulogy, this class I used to teach about writing eulogies, I would write on the board, an obituary is the facts, and the eulogies are the truths. Because the fact, for example, that I was born in St. Louis Park, Minnesota on June 3rd, 1960, that's a fact. It doesn't tell you anything about me except my age.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are truths about my life that have nothing to do with the facts, and those are what are most important and enduring. So she asked me, how did you come up with this? I said, well, these are the questions I ask when I'm gathered to gather a family together to talk about their loved one to prepare for the funeral, so that I can write a eulogy and they can write eulogies about the truth of this person's life, not the facts. Everybody knows the facts. They're irrelevant.
Yeah.
So this is an attempt to help people explore the truth of their lives, because then, Sherry, once you have that, then you get to do something that I think is enormously important. You get to hold that MRI of your internal truth up to the light, and you get to ask yourself, I think, the most important question a human being can ask, which is, okay, this is what I say my truth is. Am I living it? Or is my life mostly pretend, kabuki?
I
This
took that quote from you right here.
it's an
Are we
op-
living our truth, or are we
yeah,
just talking about our truth?
right. Are we in alignment, or are we just bullshitting everyone, including ourselves? And the fact that life ends makes this doubly sad if we're not living an aligned life, because we're missing the opportunity for that wholeness that is so important to happiness and fulfillment and meaning. So this ethical will, yes, it's for your loved ones when you're gone, but it's also for you. It's a
That's,
gut check.
yeah. That's what I got so much, is that you get to actually align your life, like your truth, your actions, your values, and to exactly what you're saying. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
as valuable as it is for the person who receives it, it seems like it's
I'll give you a good example. One of the questions is, what do you want your epitaph to be? What do you want written on your headstone? I spend a lot of time in cemeteries, and despite the fact that we all lead unique lives, almost all the headstones are the same. We almost all have the same goal, which is loving, fill in the blank, loving husband, grandfather, father, brother, friend, loving mother, grandmother, wife, father, husband, friend, whatever it is. That's what we all say we want.
Yep.
Now, can you reverse engineer your life in order to be aligned with what you say you want to be remembered as. Do you want it to say, loving brother, and you haven't called your sisters in a year? Really? Really? So it's an opportunity to start reverse engineering your life in contemplation of death.
What have you learned about helping people with grieving, with pain, with loss, with facing loss? What have you learned about facing life?
So many things. I mean, ultimately, this is what the beauty of what remains is about, but I can tick off a few important ones. One of them is that life matters, that you matter. Another is that it really is amazing what you can get used to. Human beings, not because they are extraordinary, but because they are ordinary human beings. We all have built within us this incredible strength to walk through the valley of shadows back out into the light. And knowing that and having faith in that is the way to live. We cannot die because people we love die. We can live more fully. I've learned that suffering is not worth the insights, but neither is it worth less. Like, none of the pain we endure as human beings is worth it. Our goal is not to make it worth less. Do I wish my father never had Alzheimer's? Yes. Do I wish he was still alive? Yes. Was it worth everything I learned for him to die? No. But as I say in the book, as you know, if you have to go through hell, and we all go through hell, then there are many forms of hell. There's the hell of losing someone we love to death. There's the hell of cancer. There's the hell of a kid in trouble. There's the hell of losing your reputation. There's the hell of being betrayed. There's the hell of betraying another. There are many forms of hell. We all walk through hell. The point is not to come out empty-handed. That's the point. And that's what I've learned. We don't have to come out of hell empty-handed. We can come out of hell with insights and commitments and a faith that ennobles our life and makes our life more beautiful. And no, it's not worth it. It's both. It's another duality.
What are you coming out with from this life?
From mine?
I know these are simple questions.
Well, I want to answer it honestly. I hope that I am moving toward really, really accepting the fact that I cannot have a better past. That I'm really giving up hope for a better past. Because it's obvious we can't have a better past, but we can spend a lot of time regretting it and living in it. So that's one thing I'm really hopeful that I continue to make progress on, which is really understanding that as simple as it sounds, it's not an easy thing to internalize. You cannot have a better past. Your past regrets must be about your future opportunities. I have learned, this might sound crazy to you, that I really am going to die. How much time do we have? Because are we almost out of time?
We can go 15 more minutes.
Oh, good.
If you can.
I can. And let me explain what I mean by that. Now, already, we've said it. I had officiated at 1,000 funerals before my father died. And I'd helped 1,000 families. My father dies. I fly back to Minneapolis. I stay overnight at one of my sister's homes, and we show up in the morning at the synagogue where the funeral is going to be. In Minneapolis, the funeral's at the synagogue, and then you travel in processional to the cemetery, and the burial's at the cemetery. I show up to the synagogue, and I walk into the little room off a hallway where we're all kind of put to wait there, and then the young rabbi walks into the room. And I remember thinking to myself, I know exactly how the young rabbi feels right now, but I have no idea how I feel.
Mm.
And then he, as rabbis always do, walked us into where my father's body was in the casket to see my father's body before the casket would be closed and the funeral would begin. People would be allowed in and the funeral would begin. Now, to understand the import of what I'm about to say, you have to realize that my father and I have looked almost identical at every age. Like if you saw a picture of me at 10 years old and you saw a picture of my dad at 10 years old, other than our clothing, you wouldn't know which one of us it was. So I'm 63 and I look exactly like my dad. I mean, freakishly like my dad at 63. You see these bags here, Sherry?
Yeah, are they inherited?
That's my dad right there. This is my dad. You know, people in LA say, you know, you're on TV and this stuff. You could get that. I mean, you know, you could get that taken care of. And I was like, why would I do that? This is my dad.
Yeah.
I see my dad in the mirror. So I approached the casket, and keep in mind, I had stood next to 1,000 other families while they looked at their loved one's body. And to be honest with you, like I was there and present and supportive, but I could have eaten a sandwich. Like it wasn't my loved one. Like, I was fine.
Right.
I approached the casket, and I remember I put my hand on my father's chest because I didn't want to feel his skin because I knew it would be cold. But I wanted to touch him. And I looked at him, and my first thought was, this is how I'm going to look when I'm dead. And my son is bending over my casket. I am going to die. 58 years old, 1,000 funerals. It never really hit me that I am going to die. And my children are going to bend over my casket. And they're going to watch it be lowered into the ground. And they're going to be sitting under a green awning on white folding chairs. And then they're going to get into the car and kick off their shoes and loosen their ties and head for home and be sad and laughing and all of it. Like, I am going to die for real. And that realization changed my life profoundly and for the better.
Powerful, because yes, we don't. What are you living more presently? Are you living more what?
Okay, what are the practical implications of that?
Yeah.
Number one, okay, now another thing you need to know about my dad. We weren't poor, but we lived like we were poor. Like my father, there were 7 of us in a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom home. And you know, it was fine. I mean, that was our life. My father reused his dental floss, just to give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Okay? In a restaurant, he'd pull like a nasty used tea bag out of his flannel shirt pocket and just ask for some hot water. You know, that was my dad, for real.
Yeah. No, I understand.
So my father dies, and I realize I'm going to die. And we decided to build a little cabin in the Joshua Tree Desert, which is a place I love. So we would have a little family place to get away. Because why? Because I'm going to die. I started creating my retirement plan. I don't mean financially. I started talking to the congregation about how many more years I was willing to do this, and how I wanted to gently, you know, with a soft landing for both parties, start to imagine and engineer the end. That was because my father died. I am a more compassionate rabbi. I'm a better rabbi. I'm a better husband. I'm a better dad. I'm a better man because my father died. These are the takeaways. And you know from the book that I had a very complicated relationship with my father because he was a very difficult person.
Mm-hmm.
I have also changed in the sense that his death has rounded some of those sharp edges of memory. And in a way, my relationship with my father is better in death than it was in life. And I appreciate him more and differently than I did while he was alive. And this too is just part of learning to make peace with the cognitive dissonance of having a parent. I mean, there wouldn't be a therapist working in the world if we didn't love and hate our parents.
Yeah.
Right? If our parents didn't get it right and wrong, there'd be no therapist alive working.
Well,
So
they're the ones that, created the initial triggers. I mean, the initial wound. Like that's
that's right.
it. Yeah.
That's right. So these are the ways. Now, I will say, unfortunately, it has not led to me taking better physical care of myself.
Okay.
Uh, and I'm hoping that that's next. But and I hope that I won't be. Well, I won't because I've engineered the retirement plan. I am not going to be a workaholic till the day I die.
Good. You've done a lot of serving. And
Yeah,
as
I have, and I'm burnt out. And before my father died, I never would have admitted it because it would have been a sign of weakness.
mm,
But I don't see it as a sign of weakness. I see it as just a truth that needs to be embraced. I am burnt out.
that is that acceptance that you were talking about,
That's right.
being able to say that. And you're right. And it does make you, well, you didn't say these words, but I say more powerful leader to accept these aspects of yourself, because then you get to now actually start serving yourself.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting? Since I've been talking more openly about this and the retirement
Mhm.
plans have been announced,
Uh-huh.
a lot of these older men by older, I mean my age in the congregation, including people who I was afraid to ever tell I was burnt out because they were
Uh-huh.
trustees and the president and this and that, they all feel the same way.
Yes, truth
And
telling.
they're coming to me now as a model, as an example, and saying, "How did you come to the conclusion? What are you thinking about the future? What do you wish you had done earlier?" Now all of a sudden I'm the expert on like
I was gonna say, now you're leading in this way. Now you're serving in this way,
yeah,
actually. Like,
it's like these people I was afraid to tell I'm burnt out are like, "Oh man, I'm so glad you've come clean about that because I feel the same way. What
uh,
should I do?"
truth telling, honestly, when I first came out and talked openly about wearing wigs because I have hair loss, all of a
Mhm.
sudden I became this thing for people like coming to acceptance about their
Yeah.
own secrets and the things. And it's
Yes.
an,
Well, I've done that, as you know, with mental health.
yeah.
I suffer from an underlying anxiety disorder, which goes
Mhm.
way back in my childhood because I grew up in a fear-filled home.
Mhm.
And I have spoken and written openly and honestly about what a difference psychiatric care and medication has made in my life. I mean, it absolutely changed my life for the better forever. And I'm proud of it, right? And we need to destigmatize mental health. I mean, the simplest way I put it to people is, you see these?
Mhm.
Without these, I couldn't be a rabbi. I need
It,
glasses. I have a physical
uh-huh.
disability. I need these. Nobody cares. Nobody cares.
Right. There's not something
So,
wrong with you because,
right.
yeah.
So I like to say, like, store bought is fine. Store bought is fine. I take 125 milligrams of Zoloft every day, and I'm a calmer, more at peace person. I'm still myself, but
Mhm.
I'm not afraid of getting fired or losing my, identity or whatever it is, or being homeless, eating cat food on the street. All these crazy fears that I always had to suppress with a brutal work ethic. At one point during the pandemic, they just came flying out of the basement of my psyche, these demons, and I could not function. And this combination of therapy and medication gave me my life back, and I'm proud of it. And this is like you with your hair loss. I By the way, I think hair is way overrated anyway. Just
I tell myself that every day when this comes off.
yeah, yeah. But it opened up just a flood of people seeking me out and saying, "How do I take the step you've taken? What do I do?" And I'm proud of that. Very proud of that.
It's part of your journey, and I'm grateful that you're sharing that with everybody and being so open, because yes, of course, it does make people feel that it is okay what they're going through. And I imagine, because we are wrapping this up now, even though I could talk to you forever, I want to talk about the relationship, because when people hear mental health journey and then they hear the words joy, when I talk about joy, but then they're so deeply ingrained or with their anxiety or depression, or I just want to get your insight into what joy means to you and the simple ways that you are able to connect to it and find it in your own life.
Well, I'm going to parse it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's happiness and there's joy. They're both beautiful. Happiness is a more temporary, kind of ephemeral thing. An ice cream cone, a
Mm-hmm.
promotion of this or that. You can be happy because of things and moments, but it's fleeting. It comes and it goes. And it's kind of sometimes just luck, like winning the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with happiness. And by the way, you can be happy alone. Okay. I can be
Yeah.
sitting alone in my den watching the Minnesota Vikings play football, eating a quart of ice cream, and I'm freaking happy, right?
Uh-huh.
But joy is a different level. For me, joy is sort of the fruit of a slow growing, communally nurtured tree, right? Joy is going through everything together, parenting a child, and then walking that child down the aisle. That joy at the wedding, that's not about the wedding. It's about those 30 years, right? And
Yep.
so joy is something that is built through consistent communal effort with one person or an entire community. So it takes a village for joy. It takes an individual for happiness. They're both important. They're both beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And of course, that's why I relate to you, because, I do understand the difference between happiness and joy. My last question that I want to ask you is, what story do you want to leave behind for your kid? What do you want them to talk about, say about you?
He really loved us.
Thank you. Everybody, you heard it here first. Tell your story, share your story, give your family and your loved ones more than just the material stuff. I'd love for you to go out and grab Rabbi Steve's books, all of them. He's got a lot, but here are a couple of them for you when I'm gone. The Beauty of What Remains. Tell everybody how they can stay connected to you.
Follow me on Instagram, Steve underscore, there it is on the screen, leader. I actually answer everything myself. I love Instagram. I do have a website. I don't interact with it, but you can find a lot of things there. And Wilshire Boulevard Temple, I'm easy to find in Los Angeles. But the best, for people not in Los Angeles, I think is to reach me is Instagram. And again, there's a lot of, if you want to watch videos or whatever, there's a lot of that on the website.
Okay, I lied. One last question.
Yeah.
What's next for you?
I have 1 year of full-time senior rabbi ahead of me, so I'm going to focus on that. But I'm thinking about if and what I would write about when I do retire, when I'm going to go half-time starting in September of 24. So I think I'll probably take on another book at that point. And in the short term, although there's now a writer's strike, I'm working as a creative consultant on a couple of really interesting TV shows. That one of them is definitely getting made, the other is speculative, but it's really fun. And I love being in the writer's room with people 25 years younger than I am. It's at my age to be able to enter a completely new world full of young people is, I mean, what a trip for me.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And I want to spend more time in the desert, which, our house will be done pretty soon. And I also really, really love solitude.
Same. So cool. The writers group sounds like another summer camp for you, just being
It is.
around really
That's
cool
right.
people. Like
That's
that's what it
right.
sounds like. I want to thank you so much again for being here with me today, talking with us, sharing with us your heart, and helping us to make more meaning of the lives that we're currently living. And thank you all so much for watching. Join me on this Thursday, where I will be talking to New York Times bestselling author Neil Donald Walsh, the author of Conversations with God. Thank you, Steve.
Thank
Appreciate
you,
it.
Sharon.
Thank you,
Great to be with
everybody.
you. Thank you,
Same
everyone.
here. Bye bye.
Bye.